Did you know that the world isn't always what you see it to be? Have you ever considered, just for 1 second, that the last time you climbed the stairs, you didn't make it? Consider this the next time you climb up or down a flight of stairs. Perhaps as you're reaching the top or stepping down onto the bottom, that while you were ascending or descending, that you actually fell, and your mind is refusing to register it. Perhaps instead of walking away from the stairs and going about your day the way you think you did, you're actually at the bottom, injured. Perhaps you broke some bones. Perhaps it was your neck. Perhaps you are actually dying. Consider this proposal, as at any moment the illusion could break. You'll wake up at the bottom of the stairs, bleeding and broken, or awaken in a hospital bed, potentially with brain damage. Perhaps the illusion will be broken only by the coldness of death. Perhaps at any moment during this illusion, you could slip away and everything will just suddenly go black. 1 second, you're driving your car or watching TV, and the next, nothing. Perhaps this is your wake-up call. I must have been 6 or 7 when I lived in Lebanon. The country was ravaged by war at the time and murders were common and frequent. I remember during a particularly vicious era, when the bombings rarely stopped, I would stay at home sitting in front of my television, watching a very, very strange show. It was a kids' show that lasted about 30 minutes. And contained strange and sinister images. To this day, I believe it was a thinly veiled attempt on the part of the media to use scare tactics to keep kids in place, because the moral of every episode revolved around very uptight ideologies. Stuff like, bad kids stay up late, bad kids have their hands under the covers when they sleep, and bad kids steal food from the fridge at night. It was very weird, and in Arabic to top it off. I didn't understand much of it, but for the most part, the images were very graphic and comprehensive. The thing that stuck with me the most, however, was the closing scene. It remained much the same in every episode. The camera would zoom in on an old rusted closed door. As it got closer to the door, strange and sometimes even agonizing screams would become more audible. It was extremely frightening, especially for children's programming. Then a text would appear on the screen in Arabic reading, "That's where bad kids go." Eventually, both the image and the sound would fade out, and that would be the end of the episode. About 15 or 16 years later, I became a journalistic photographer. That show had been in my mind all my life, popping up in my thoughts sporadically. Eventually, I'd had enough and decided to do some research. I finally managed to uncover the location of the studio where much of that channel's programming had been recorded. Upon further research, and eventually traveling on site, I found out it was now desolate and had been abandoned after the big war ended. I entered the building with my camera. It was burnt out from the inside. Either a fire had broken out or someone had wanted to incinerate all of the wooden furniture. After a few hours of cautiously making my way into the studio and snapping pictures, I found an isolated out-of-the-way room. After having to break through a few old locks and managing to break the heavy door open, I remained frozen in the doorway for several long minutes. Traces of blood, feces, and tiny bone fragments lay scattered across the floor. It was a small room, and an extremely morbid scene. What truly frightened me, though, what made me turn away and never want to come back, was the bolted, caged microphone hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room. I think this might be the end. For us, anyway. You know, man and all that we've accomplished. I've had plenty of time to think about it since the last time I saw the sun. The last time I'd ever see it. It's not the end of the world, but it is for us. I guess it started almost a month ago, but it could be longer. There's only the clock scattered around the house to tell me how long, and half of them are dead now. Anyway, I'm straying from the point. It was on the news. A cruise ship sank for no reason. It wasn't damaged, it was just pulled straight down. The rest of the stories soon flooded in. Everything in the water was sinking. Oil rigs disappeared. People on the beach were just pulled down into the abyss. Nobody seemed able to explain why this was happening. Nothing floated anymore. It was bizarre. This filled the news for a couple of days until it just got frightening. It was during one broadcast that it changed for the worse. It was a report from some beach, an on-location report about this strange phenomenon. They were just recycling the same question we had all been asking for days. Suddenly, panic seemed to grip the face of the reporter. She screamed as the camera quickly tilted down. Her feet were sunk into the sand, down to her shin. I remember smirking, thinking it was just some overly sensitive reporter messing up. But then the camera dropped. The remaining 10 or so seconds that followed showed not just the reporter sinking into the sand, but all of them. The whole media circus that had descended on the beach to cover the same story. The reporter who was down to her shin a minute ago was now down to her chest. The shot of writhing, screaming, sinking people ended shortly as the camera was engulfed by the sand. The news stayed on for a few more days, but there was nothing to say. Some blamed sinkholes for what happened on the beach, while others argued against them from the safety of their downtown studio. The news was a waste of time now. It was much easier to look out the window. It was more or less a ghost town outside. Everyone was inside, afraid to leave their homes. It didn't seem to make sense. The roads and pavements were being absorbed by grass and dirt. Street signs and traffic lights were being consumed by the plants. Houses weren't exempt either. Some people tried to run, jumping from rooftop to rooftop, looking for higher ground. Occasionally, while flicking through what was left of the TV broadcasts, you would see skyscrapers that had become refugee camps. I had made one trip out of the house since this started, across the rooftops. It was an attempt to get supplies from a nearby supermarket, but that plan seemed to be a waste of time. The store was a husk by the time I got there. It was looted and pillaged. There was all the evidence I needed to see how bad this whole thing was. It's easy to be in denial about something like whatever this was, until it really seemed to affect you. When I got back to my house, I noticed something. My car was gone. Well, almost. You could still see the top poking out from the overgrowth and loose soil. It wasn't just my car. It was all of them. Bigger vehicles were still in sight, only partially obscured, but they were going down too. A few days later, my whole bottom floor was subterranean. I had managed to block the windows and door from bursting in from all the dirt and soil. But it was just a cell now. A mausoleum. It wasn't somewhere I wanted to be. I spent most of my time by an upstairs window, staring at the hostile world outside. My neighbor died yesterday. He fell off his roof and was swallowed by the earth. He's not the first to do that either. What made it notable was why he fell. He was trying to stop his dog from getting out. The dog's fine, or I assume so. It ran off. Animals aren't affected. This is our fate. That nihilistic little discovery was too much for me to bear. This whole thing was a living nightmare. I hit the bottle hard and passed out for the night. When I woke up, my head pounded in darkness. I flicked the light switches and the fuses, but the power was out. I took the flashlight by the fuse box and looked around the house for supplies. While checking the upstairs, I saw it. It was the last glimpse of natural light I'll ever see. I had been thinking it was just night, that I had slept all day in an alcohol coma. By the time I could cross the room to the window, it was gone. I was underground. I tried to get out, smashing through plaster and tiles to be greeted with a stream of soil pouring out from where the sky should be. I don't know how much longer I've got in here. In my house-sized coffin, there's only so much food and air. I've got a little bit of light from a couple of candles and a book of matches. The flashlight died some time ago. But this is our fate. Humanity's fate. Our return to the earth. I saw Audrey in the living room, staring out the cracked window. She just stood there, straight and ladylike, wearing the torn, dirty white gown she had worn for years. Not a movement she made. I was worried. She must have been scared for me. I only told her yesterday, so it was reasonable that she was still shocked. I knew she didn't expect it from me, but I think deep down she knew it had to be done. Approaching her, I stepped over shattered glass and splinters protruding from the creaky wood floors. I reached the window where she stood and looked down at her from the side. I put my hand on her shoulder. She flinched. She looked up at me. I had never seen such a frightened look in my entire life. Her soft blue eyes were wide and shifty, and her mouth hung open. The dirt that caked her face was blurred by a single tear. Audrey, She swallowed hard. Her lip trembled. I prayed she didn't burst out in tears. I would start crying myself if she did. Listen, I know you're scared, and I am too, but I had a hard time finding my words. But just think about all the changes we could make. We're getting paid a lot for this, you know. You, me, June. We could get away from this old shack and live in a wonderful house. And we could buy great food, hot meals. I could hardly continue. Audrey stared back out the window. She knew. I knew. We could only focus on the rewards after the deed was done. It's gonna be wonderful. She didn't reply. Audrey. The old clock ticked. I looked up and saw the time. 10 a.m. It was time to go. I couldn't believe I was doing it. This would be something that would have a mark on history. Police would search the entire country, but if everything went according to plan, I could pull it off without being caught. All I could think about was my 2 daughters as I grabbed my gun. John F. Kennedy wouldn't be an easy target, but I needed to do it. For the money, for my life, for Audrey. There they are, straight ahead. Can you see them? Of course you can. They can see you. There's so many of them. Look at them all. An onslaught of shambling limbs and open mouths. A frenzied horde, driven mad by the perfect sickness. There has to be at least 50 of those things out there, all scratching and clawing to get in, to get to you. And they will get in. They will get to you. Eventually, that door is coming down, and this room will flood with a mob of undead ghouls. They will converge on you. They will devour you. And when they are finished, they will move on as if you never existed. In your final moments, you will look up into the soulless eyes of all those grisly faces and watch, helpless, as they reach down at you and tear into whatever of yours they can get their bloody little hands on. Tears are useless. Screaming is just a waste of time. No one is coming to save you. No one even knows you're in here. Everyone either is outside trying to get in, Or like you, trapped inside somewhere, trying to keep them out. There's an army out there, and day by day, it gets bigger, stronger, and hungrier. Now the recruitment drive has come to your front door. So, what are you going to do? What can you do? Like it or not, they're coming in, and that one last bullet won't be enough to stop them. The way I see it, it would be like throwing a rock at a tornado, hoping to scare it back up into the clouds. So what are you going to do? What's your big master plan? How are you going to MacGyver your way out of this one? Face it, kid, it's over. You've had it. You gave it a good run, I'll give you that. But in the end, it is what it is. And you, well, you just didn't have what it takes. It's funny how you can get used to seeing yourself on TV. I was just 6 when I first saw or noticed my doppelganger. I was watching live coverage of some local event I don't remember, when I saw a boy who looked just like me. I told my mom and she chuckled, but said that happens to everyone now and then. From then on, I'd see him from time to time, as an extra on a kid's show, in the crowd at a baseball game, in one of those interstitials where the local news station visits a local school and gives them a shout out. Always when I was alone, never in photographs or recorded media. Though I did once see him in footage from a rock concert in the 1980s that was being replayed on MTV. He aged with me, and often wore clothes I had in my wardrobe. I got used to it over time, and by the time I reached 6th grade, I started to see him less and less frequently. All the way into my 20s, he appeared just enough to set me a little on edge, but infrequently enough that I could live comfortably with long periods of not thinking about him. Now that I'm a celebrity, I've gotten very used to seeing myself on TV. I'm starting to get nervous because lately, the paparazzi have been reporting more and more sightings of me in places where I haven't been. And many people are claiming on the internet to have met me under circumstances I haven't been in. I know the tabloids make up stuff about celebrities, and I know people sometimes lie about rubbing shoulders with their idols, but this feels different. My managers, agents, and publicists are all very excited about the buzz. At least they can sleep easy about it.